Imagine this for a second. The car sitting in your driveway right now, the one you've trusted for years, could be on the verge of extinction. Not because it's old, not because it's unreliable, but because the entire brand behind it is collapsing right before our eyes. Across the auto industry, once iconic names are being quietly abandoned. Dealerships are shutting down, resale values are tanking, electric car plans are stalling, and loyal customers are left holding the bag with vehicles no one wants to touch. And here's the scary part. Some of these brands still look strong from the outside. You see the commercials, the sleek models, the luxury badges, and you think that company is safe. But behind the scenes, it's a completely different story. In today's video, we're pulling back the curtain on 10 car brands that are dangerously close to collapse. Some are already fading into history. Others are barely surviving on life support. And one of them might be a brand you still believe in, but that blind trust could cost you thousands. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear might change the way you shop for your next car forever. Lincoln, the forgotten luxury giant. Once upon a time, Lincoln wasn't just a car brand. It was a symbol. We're talking presidential limousines, chauffeur-driven town cars rolling through city streets, and a reputation for American luxury that few could rival. If you saw a Lincoln badge, you instantly knew the driver had taste, money, and status. But fast forward to today, and Lincoln is a shadow of its former self. In 2024, the brand sold just under 88,000 vehicles in the U.S. That's a staggering 27% drop from the previous year, marking its lowest point in over a decade. Think about that. A company that once defined American prestige can't even crack six figures in annual sales anymore. And it gets worse. Lincoln has no sedans left in its lineup. The iconic Continental? Gone. The MKZ? Discontinued. What's left are SUVs, the Nautilus, the Corsair, that are struggling to stand out in a crowded market where rivals like Lexus, BMW, and even Cadillac are dominating with better technology and sharper designs. You'd think maybe Lincoln could bounce back with electric vehicles, right? Wrong. While Cadillac is charging ahead with models like the Lyriq and the Celestiq, Lincoln's EV future is nothing but vague promises. The much-hyped Star concept? Still just that, a concept. No timeline, no production, no excitement. And here's the real red flag. Ford quietly moved production of the Lincoln Nautilus out of the US and into China. That might sound like a small detail, but in the auto industry, it's a signal. It tells us Lincoln isn't a priority anymore. Ford is pouring billions into F-150s and EV trucks, while Lincoln is basically an afterthought. The ripple effects are everywhere. Dealerships are closing, service centers are vanishing, and owners are left with fewer options for repairs and support. And if you're thinking resale value will save you, think again. Lincoln models consistently rank near the bottom of the luxury market for retained value, meaning you'll take a brutal hit if you ever try to trade in. So while Lincoln still exists on paper, the writing is on the wall. No flagship sedan, no serious EV strategy, no clear identity, and no priority from its own parent company. If you're considering buying a Lincoln today, you have to ask yourself one thing. Do you really want to own a brand that its own maker has quietly given up on? Nissan. From street legend to survival mode. There was a time when Nissan was the car you could count on. The legendary GTR tearing up tracks, the sleek 240Z turning heads, the rock-solid Maxima earning respect as the four-door sports car. For decades, Nissan wasn't just another automaker. It was a brand people genuinely loved and trusted. But today, that legacy feels like a distant memory. On the surface, Nissan still looks alive. In 2024, they managed to sell over 875,000 vehicles in the US. Sounds impressive, right? But look closer, and you'll see the cracks. The Maxima, once the pride of Nissan sedans, has seen sales collapse by over 90%. The Altima, another former powerhouse, is fading just as quickly. The models that once carried Nissan's reputation are now hanging by a thread. And behind the curtain, things are far uglier. The company is drowning in a $5.4 billion loss. A highly anticipated merger with Honda, a deal that could have created the third largest automaker in the world, completely fell apart in 2024. Why? Because Honda refused to give up control. That deal might have been Nissan's lifeline, but now it's gone, leaving the company scrambling for answers. Desperate moves followed. 9,000 jobs slashed, multiple plants shut down, and planned electric vehicles for the US market scrapped entirely. No hybrids, no plug-ins, no solid roadmap for the future. Just panic and patchwork decisions. And let's not forget the scandal that started Nissan's downward spiral. Former CEO Carlos Ghosn was arrested back in 2018 for hiding millions in income and treating company funds like his personal bank account. And when things got too hot, he literally escaped Japan in a shipping crate, a headline that stunned the world. Since then, Nissan's leadership has been in constant chaos. CEOs come and go, each one failing to restore direction. According to leaked internal reports, some insiders claim Nissan may only have 12 to 15 months left unless a miracle deal shows up soon. Think about that. A company that once built some of the most iconic cars on the road might be staring down the end of the line. For everyday buyers, the risks couldn't be clearer. A Nissan purchase today isn't just about reliability or resale value. It's about whether the company will even exist to support your car in a few years. Nissan used to stand for innovation and excitement, but now it feels like a brand stuck in survival mode, burning through time and money while its rivals speed ahead. The question is, how much longer can Nissan hang on before the wheels completely fall off? Chrysler, a brand on life support. If you grew up in the US, chances are you remember when Chrysler was everywhere. The brand gave us cars like the 300 sedan, minivans that defined a generation of family road trips, and a reputation for being one of Detroit's Big Three. Back in 2005, Chrysler sold over 500,000 vehicles in the US. That's not just healthy, that's thriving. But fast forward to 2024, and the picture looks completely different. Chrysler's US sales crashed below 145,000 vehicles, a staggering collapse that looks less like a slump and more like a death spiral. And what's left in Chrysler's lineup today? Basically, nothing. The legendary 300 sedan was discontinued in 2023. The Voyager is only available to fleet buyers. That leaves the Pacifica minivan as Chrysler's last real product. But even that lifeline is slipping. Pacifica sales fell 17% in just the last year. And without a breakout hit, Chrysler is running out of time. There was hope once. The all-electric Airflow SUV, a futuristic concept that was supposed to be Chrysler's ticket into the EV market. But in mid-2024, parent company Stellantis quietly pulled the plug. Too expensive, outdated design, shrinking demand. Just like that, Chrysler's future EV savior was erased from the roadmap. And here's where it gets darker. Stellantis is now reviewing all 14 of its brands with one goal: cut the dead weight. And make no mistake, Chrysler is right near the top of that list. The cracks are showing everywhere. In 2025, a Chrysler dealership in Maine defaulted on a $5.7 million loan. Another in Georgia shut down after a fraud scandal that left customers without trade-in titles or cash. When dealerships themselves are collapsing under financial pressure, that's not just bad news, it's a red siren. Yes, Chrysler is trying to fight back. A refreshed Pacifica is on the way, and a new midsize SUV has been teased for 2026. But let's be honest, does anyone really believe Chrysler has the momentum, the loyalty, or the identity left to make a comeback? Because here's the harsh reality. When a brand starts circling the drain, it's not just about poor sales. Resale values tank, parts dry up, service becomes a nightmare. And for the buyer, it means one thing. You're left holding the bag with a car nobody wants. Chrysler isn't just struggling, it's collapsing in real time. And unless something massive changes, we may be witnessing the final chapter of one of America's oldest car brands. Buick, the ghost brand of America. If you asked the average American today to name a Buick model, most would struggle to come up with even one. And that's the problem. Because once upon a time, Buick wasn't just recognizable, it was one of the best-selling brands in the country. Your parents or grandparents might remember Buicks as stylish sedans that carried real prestige. But in 2024, Buick's US sales barely scraped past 130,000 units. That's not just a dip, that's a brand losing its grip on relevance. Think about what's left of Buick's lineup today. The Regal, LaCrosse, and Lucerne, all discontinued. Those were the models that gave Buick a sense of character. Now, all that remains are a handful of nearly identical SUVs: the Encore, Envision, and Envista. And the truth is, they're hard to tell apart from cheaper Chevrolet or GMC models sitting just across the lot. So what does Buick actually stand for? Is it luxury? Not really. Value? Not anymore. Innovation? Definitely not. Buick today is a brand without identity, floating in limbo while rivals move forward with bold strategies. And when it comes to the future, the story doesn't get any better. GM has funneled billions into Cadillac, positioning it as the face of American EV luxury. Cadillac has the Lyriq, the Celestiq, and real media buzz. Buick, a flashy wildcat EV concept that made headlines for a week and then disappeared into silence. No production timeline, no specs, no commitment to put it on US roads. Just another empty promise. The reality is that Buick only survives today because of China. Over 80% of Buick's global sales come from the Chinese market, where Buick is still seen as a status symbol. But here in the US, it's fading fast. And if GM decides it's not worth the effort to keep Buick alive here, the brand could vanish almost overnight. And we're already seeing the warning signs. Buick dealerships are quietly closing. Advertising is practically non-existent. Younger buyers ignore it. Older buyers have forgotten it. And when a brand is invisible in its own home market, it's only a matter of time before the axe falls. For drivers, the danger is obvious. If Buick is pulled from the US, resale values will collapse. Parts and service will become harder to find. And owners will be stuck with SUVs carrying a badge that no longer means anything. So while Buick may still technically exist, in America, it feels more like a ghost brand, a relic from another era, drifting closer and closer to the end. Pontiac, the fallen icon. There are car brands that fade quietly into the background, and then there are legends that crash so hard, people still talk about it years later. Pontiac falls into that second category. At its peak in the late 1960s, Pontiac was unstoppable. In 1968 alone, the brand sold over 800,000 vehicles. Cars like the GTO, the Firebird Trans Am, and later cult oddities like the Aztek didn't just sell, they carved out entire fan bases. Pontiac had swagger, it had muscle, it had identity, but then came the decline. By 2009, Pontiac sales had plummeted to under 180,000 units, and the brand was on life support. Then the 2008 financial crisis hit, and General Motors was bleeding cash. GM needed a $53 billion government bailout to survive, and as part of that restructuring, it had to make brutal cuts. Pontiac was one of the first brands to be sacrificed. The very last Pontiac, a white G6 sedan, rolled off the line in January 2010. Just like that, one of America's most iconic car brands was gone. The aftermath was rough. Dealerships closed across the country, leaving thousands of employees jobless. Loyal owners suddenly found themselves stuck with cars no one wanted to touch. Resale values tanked. Parts became harder to find. Overnight, Pontiac went from an American dream to an American liability. Sure, there's a silver lining. Some Pontiacs became collectibles. Enthusiasts still chase down classic GTOs, Turbo Grand Prix, or rare Solstice Roadsters. And the Firebird, of course, still enjoys cult status thanks to Hollywood and pop culture. But here's the catch. For everyday drivers, owning a Pontiac now is a gamble. Maintenance is unpredictable. Insurance companies often treat Pontiacs as orphan vehicles, which can mean higher premiums. And with no factory support, no dealer network, and shrinking parts availability, keeping one on the road gets more expensive every year. Pontiac's legacy is untouchable, no doubt. But in today's market, it's a dead brand driving. And for those still hanging on, the risk isn't just financial, it's emotional. Because watching your once proud Pontiac slowly become harder and harder to support feels like watching history fade right in front of you. So if you're thinking of buying a Pontiac today, remember this. You're not buying a car brand. You're buying a piece of nostalgia. And nostalgia doesn't come with a warranty. Genesis, the luxury experiment that's losing steam. When Genesis first hit the scene, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Here was a brand daring to take on giants like BMW, Lexus, and Mercedes-Benz, but at a fraction of the price. Sleek designs, plush interiors, cutting-edge tech, all wrapped up in an underdog story that made car enthusiasts take notice. For a while, it seemed like Genesis really could rewrite the rules of the luxury market. But fast forward to today, and the story isn't nearly as glamorous. In 2024, Genesis's U.S. sales flatlined at just over 69,000 vehicles. That's not growth. That's a 15% drop from the year before. And for a brand still trying to prove itself in the most competitive luxury segment in the world, those numbers are a dangerous sign. Let's talk about the lineup. The G70, once praised for being sporty and affordable, now lags behind rivals in tech, performance, and resale value. The G90, Genesis's flagship sedan, looks good on paper, but barely registers on the radar of serious luxury buyers. And with sedans fading fast in the US, Genesis is pushing a dream fewer and fewer buyers are interested in. Even their SUVs, which should have been the saviors, the GV70 and GV80, haven't delivered the blockbuster numbers Hyundai was counting on. Reviews have cooled, owner forums are buzzing with complaints about reliability and software glitches, and the shine of new luxury is quickly wearing off. Then there's the electric future. Genesis launched the GV60 EV, but it's expensive, niche, and underwhelming in range. At a time when Tesla and luxury rivals are pushing the EV game forward, Genesis feels late to the party and underprepared. But here's the biggest problem. Genesis doesn't have its own dealership network. Most buyers are still walking into Hyundai dealerships to shop for a Genesis. Think about that. Luxury buyers expecting the red carpet treatment are sitting next to someone haggling over an Elantra. That kills prestige, destroys brand confidence, and makes the post-sale experience wildly inconsistent. Sure, Genesis has promised dedicated showrooms, but the rollout has been painfully slow. In many areas, they don't exist at all. And when a luxury brand can't deliver the luxury experience, it loses the one thing that sets it apart. Behind the scenes, Hyundai itself seems to be moving on. Billions are being invested in Kia and the Ioniq EV line, while Genesis barely gets a mention in future strategies. That silence says everything. So where does that leave Genesis? Right now, it's sitting at a crossroads. Deliver a breakout hit soon, or risk becoming another failed luxury experiment, joining the ranks of Saab, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac. For buyers, that means real risks, falling resale values, shrinking service support, and the very real possibility that the brand you thought was the next big thing could quietly fade into history. Genesis came out swinging, but today, it feels less like a luxury revolution and more like a dream slipping away. Infiniti, the luxury brand that lost its identity. When Infiniti first arrived in the US back in the late 80s, it made waves. It wasn't just another luxury badge. It was bold, modern, and fresh, a sleek rival designed to go head-to-head with BMW, Lexus, and Mercedes. For years, Infiniti carried that reputation: stylish design, strong performance, and a sense of excitement. But fast forward to 2024, and the picture couldn't be more different. Infiniti's US sales dropped to just 57,890 units, a 13% decline and part of a downward slide that's been happening for over a decade. At this point, it's not just a slump. It's a slow-motion exit. The clearest sign of trouble? Infiniti no longer feels like a standalone luxury brand. More and more dealerships are merging Infiniti with Nissan under one roof. On paper, it saves costs, but for buyers, it screams decline. When a luxury brand loses its own showroom identity, that's the automotive equivalent of waving the white flag. And the product lineup isn't helping. By the end of 2025, Infiniti is pulling the plug on the QX50 and QX55. That leaves a shrinking portfolio of SUVs, including the QX60 and upcoming QX65, both aimed squarely at high-income buyers. There's no strategy for affordability, no entry-level options, and no effort to reconnect with mainstream audiences. Meanwhile, trade tariffs have disrupted production in Mexico. Recalls keep piling up for issues like faulty airbags and power steering problems, and Infiniti's long history of inflated performance claims has chipped away at trust. All of this adds up to a brand that feels less like a competitor and more like an afterthought. And here's the kicker. Infiniti's parent company, Nissan, is in crisis mode itself, slashing jobs, closing plants, and cutting back EV plans, which means Infiniti isn't exactly a top priority. Nissan says they're backing Infiniti, but let's be honest, the strategy is clear. They're chasing higher margins from fewer buyers instead of trying to rebuild broad appeal. So what does that mean for current owners? Resale values that sink fast, service support that becomes spotty as dealerships consolidate, and a brand name that once stood for luxury, now reduced to a fading shadow of what it used to be. Infiniti used to be the bold alternative. Today, it feels more like a legacy problem, a luxury brand quietly sliding toward irrelevance, one closed dealership at a time. Suzuki, the brand that vanished without a sound. Most car brands make headlines when they collapse. Dealership closures, bankruptcy filings, shocking press conferences. But Suzuki? It didn't go out with a bang. It just disappeared. In 2012, Suzuki officially exited the US car market. No big farewell, no emotional goodbye. One day it was here, the next day it was gone. And for many Americans, it barely registered. That's because Suzuki never truly gave buyers a reason to care. The problem was simple. Their cars were bland. Underpowered engines, forgettable designs, and zero excitement. While rivals like Toyota, Honda, and even Hyundai were pushing out bold, tech-packed models, Suzuki kept showing up with vehicles that blended into the background. No star model, no killer feature, nothing that made buyers say, "I've got to have that." But walking away from the US wasn't the end of Suzuki's troubles. Far from it. In 2016, Suzuki admitted to using improper testing methods on fuel economy and emissions for over 2 million vehicles across 16 models. The fallout was massive, a global scandal that permanently damaged the brand's credibility. And it didn't stop there. Soon after, German regulators launched a probe into Suzuki's diesel engines, suspecting they were using illegal defeat devices, the same type of cheating software that wrecked Volkswagen's reputation. Those engines, supplied by Stellantis, dragged Suzuki even deeper into controversy. Today, Suzuki still exists globally. They sell cars in Asia, motorcycles, ATVs, and even boats in the US. But the car badge? Dead. And for American buyers, that death carries real consequences. If you come across a used Suzuki on the market today, you might think, hey, cheap deal. But the reality is different. Parts are hard to find. Support is minimal. Resale value is practically non-existent. And the brand still carries the baggage of its scandals, a reputation that was never really repaired. Suzuki didn't crash in flames. It just faded into the background, leaving behind owners stuck with orphan cars and a brand name that means almost nothing in the US anymore. It's proof that sometimes the most dangerous collapse isn't the loudest. It's the one that sneaks up quietly, leaving you stranded with a car nobody wants. Suzuki, the brand that vanished without a sound. Most car brands make headlines when they collapse. Dealership closures, bankruptcy filings, shocking press conferences. But Suzuki? It didn't go out with a bang. It just disappeared. In 2012, Suzuki officially exited the US car market. No big farewell. No emotional goodbye. One day it was here, the next day it was gone. And for many Americans, it barely registered. That's because Suzuki never truly gave buyers a reason to care. The problem was simple. Their cars were bland. Underpowered engines, forgettable designs, and zero excitement. While rivals like Toyota, Honda, and even Hyundai were pushing out bold, tech-packed models, Suzuki kept showing up with vehicles that blended into the background. No star model, no killer feature, nothing that made buyers say, I've got to have that. But walking away from the US wasn't the end of Suzuki's troubles. Far from it. In 2016, Suzuki admitted to using improper testing methods on fuel economy and emissions for over 2 million vehicles across 16 models. The fallout was massive, a global scandal that permanently damaged the brand's credibility. And it didn't stop there. Soon after, German regulators launched a probe into Suzuki's diesel engines, suspecting they were using illegal defeat devices, the same type of cheating software that wrecked Volkswagen's reputation. Those engines, supplied by Stellantis, dragged Suzuki even deeper into controversy. Today, Suzuki still exists globally. They sell cars in Asia, motorcycles, ATVs, and even boats in the US. But the car badge? Dead. And for American buyers, that death carries real consequences. If you come across a used Suzuki on the market today, you might think, hey, cheap deal. But the reality is different. Parts are hard to find. Support is minimal. Resale value is practically non-existent. And the brand still carries the baggage of its scandals, a reputation that was never really repaired. Suzuki didn't crash in flames. It just faded into the background, leaving behind owners stuck with orphan cars and a brand name that means almost nothing in the US anymore. It's proof that sometimes the most dangerous collapse isn't the loudest. It's the one that sneaks up quietly, leaving you stranded with a car nobody wants. Lucid Motors, the EV dream turning into a nightmare. When Lucid first burst onto the scene, it looked like a serious Tesla rival. Their flagship, the Lucid Air, promised over 520 miles of range, more than any Tesla on the market. Sleek design, futuristic interiors, and technology that seemed years ahead. Investors piled in, headlines praised it, and Lucid was being hailed as the future of American luxury EVs. But just a few years later, that dream is unraveling. In 2024 alone, Lucid posted a staggering $3.4 billion loss. Its stock price, down more than 95% from its peak. The hype machine has gone silent, and confidence in the brand is drying up fast. Why? Because behind the glossy marketing, Lucid couldn't deliver. They struggled to meet production targets, not because of exotic tech, but because they couldn't even secure basic parts like windshields and carpeting. Cars were delayed for months, sometimes longer. And when customers finally got their vehicles, new problems surfaced. Buggy software, glitchy infotainment, and a half-baked driver assist system called Dream Drive that left many feeling underwhelmed. Then came the leadership shakeup. CEO Peter Rawlinson, once celebrated as the visionary behind Tesla's Model S, stepped down. An interim CEO was brought in to stabilize the ship, which is never a good sign for a startup fighting for survival. And here's the biggest red flag. Lucid's survival now hinges almost entirely on Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, which owns a controlling stake. Without that foreign money, Lucid likely wouldn't have even made it through 2023. But that dependency raises serious questions. Who really controls Lucid's future? And what happens if the funding stops? As if that wasn't enough, lawsuits are now stacking up. Investors have accused Lucid of misleading them about production capacity, inflating expectations just to raise more cash, while downplaying internal chaos. If courts rule against them, the fallout could be devastating. Lucid came in loud, promising to redefine luxury EVs. But so far, all it's delivered is a massive burn rate, angry customers, investor lawsuits, and mounting losses. And if things don't change fast, Lucid could join the long list of EV startups that showed up with big dreams and disappeared just as quickly. So the question is simple. Is Lucid the next Tesla, or the next cautionary tale in an industry littered with them? The final warning. So there you have it, 10 car brands that are skating on thin ice. Some, like Pontiac and Suzuki, are already gone. Others, like Lincoln, Nissan, and Chrysler, are holding on by a thread. And then you have brands like Genesis, Infiniti, Jaguar, and Lucid, companies that promised big things, but today look more like experiments than stable investments. Here's the harsh reality. When a car brand collapses, it's not just the company that suffers. It's the drivers. Dealerships shut down. Service gets harder to find. Resale values plummet. And suddenly, the car you thought was a safe investment turns into a liability sitting in your driveway. That's why it's more important than ever to look beyond the shiny ads and slick commercials. Because behind the scenes, some of these companies are in chaos. The truth is, the auto industry is changing faster than ever. Electric vehicles, global supply chains, and corporate shakeups are rewriting the rules. And not every brand is going to survive. Some of these names will vanish, just like Pontiac did. The only question is, which one will be next? So if you're car shopping right now, remember this. A car isn't just about horsepower or tech. It's about stability. It's about knowing that the company behind it will still be around in 5 years to support you. Now I want to hear from you. Backhand index pointing right, which of these brands do you think will disappear first? Do you think Nissan can pull off a miracle? Will Lincoln finally fade out? Or is Lucid doomed to become another EV startup tragedy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. And if this video saved you from making a costly mistake, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this with a friend who's car shopping, and subscribe, because we've got plenty more eye-opening car industry breakdowns coming your way. Remember, the car you buy isn't just transportation, it's a bet on the future of the brand. Choose wisely.